From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, Trump's Peril.
The Russia story is a total fabrication. It's just an excuse for the greatest loss in the history of American politics. That's all it is.
Officials from Mr. Trump's presidential campaign continue to be investigated by Congress and a special counsel for possible collusion with Russia. In Washington, talk of grand juries abound. Still, the president is undeterred. The Russia collusion story, he says, is nothing more than quote-unquote fake news. Some Republicans agree. They say that the president is being treated unfairly by an establishment unwilling to accept his election victory over Hillary Clinton. Others are not so sure. They fear Mr. Trump may fire special counsel Robert Mueller and spark a constitutional crisis. One of those worried is Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Mr. Graham is now considering action to prevent Trump from firing Mr. Mueller without judicial review.
Question, are the collusion investigations, Pat Buchanan, a threat to Trump's presidency?
I think the investigations are a threat, but there was no collusion. Trump is right between the Trump campaign and Vladimir Putin and the hacking of the DNC and John Podesta. But I'll tell you what is going on here. It is an attempt really to reverse the election of 2016 to get rid of Trump. And Trump is correct. There is an unorganized conspiracy against him in this city. It involves deep state constant leaks of security secrets and investigative secrets. It involves a mainstream media which have pounded him mercilessly. And now, because of mistakes Trump himself made, you have a special prosecutor, sort of a growing organism inside the executive branch, which is targeted on his family, his campaign, and the president. And he's right to be deeply concerned because I believe that to a degree, the Trump presidency is imperiled.
Eleanor?
Right, he should be deeply concerned, because his presidency is at risk. During Watergate, the slogan was follow the money, and we followed the money there to find out who paid for the break-in, which ultimately tied that to the Nixon re-election campaign. Follow the money here to find out why this president has never said anything negative about Vladimir Putin, why he is excessively deferential to the leader of a country that is a hostile power. And that investigation is going to lead beyond simple contacts during the campaign. It's going to lead into financial connections, probably going back to the 90s when Trump couldn't get American banks to lend him any money and needed to get money from somewhere. And so the president has tried to draw a red line saying investigating financial ties with my family and so forth crosses that red line. The investigation is going to pursue that, and that's where the peril is.
Clarence, how long is this investigation going to go? You know, it's running on, and
forever,
so the Trump people.
Forever, Tom.
I mean, obviously that helps Democrats.
But
what do you think? I mean, how long are we looking?
Seriously, you don't know how long an investigation is going to go on. Whitewater went on for about 7 years. You've got a Watergate investigation. It was almost 2 years before you had Nixon's resignation.
But what do you say to those people who support the president, who say he has been elected and yet this knife dangling over him is unjustified?
That's a red herring. You know, it's not just because he won. You know, the fact is there are a lot of suspicious activities that he's been engaged in, suspicious habits of his, beginning with his
what suspicious habits?
Amazing refusal to say anything critical of Vladimir Putin and all. I mean, you know, it goes on and on. When you've got that much, this is the way our system is supposed to work. We have 2 parties. We've got 3 branches of government. When people are behaving in a suspicious way and other folks want to have an investigation, then things move ahead. That's the way things are working right now.
What do you think, Evan?
Yeah, look, I think you really have to seclude yourself from the body of facts that are publicly known to say that there's nothing here with regard to Russia. And just this week, Trump is thanking Putin for decimating our mission in Moscow, from expelling over 750 diplomats and their families. By the way, now Trump is saying that maybe we don't need to send anyone back. Well, that's going to severely impact our ability to collect information and intelligence in Moscow, which again makes you wonder what is motivating Trump. But I'll say this, he is in peril, and he's in peril because of the politics of this now, where his support among the Republican base, while still high, is softening. Recent polls show that that his strong supporters, more of them are moving into the somewhat supportive category. And over time, that's going to create a real problem for him in the House, where if there's any impeachment referral from Mueller, he'll be more exposed.
He's not going to be impeached by a Republican House, Republican Judiciary Committee. I do agree he's in very difficult straits, but let me talk about the Russians. Many of us supported Trump because he would try to form a rapprochement with Russia, given the power and growth of power and hostility of China. And I think the very fact that, that he refuses to attack Putin is not proof of the fact of that there's been any collusion whatsoever. I mean,
but
the FBI's investigated for 1 year and it has not found any collusion. What is the matter with them, if there is?
You said the same thing with Watergate, didn't you? I mean,
Hey, look, we had guys indicted within a week after Watergate almost for the break-in.
It wasn't until after we learned about
let's
the tapes.
Let's hit an exit question,
really
a quick exit question. On a scale of 1 to 100, 100 being metaphysical certitude, 1 being Vladimir Putin's likelihood of apologizing for his election hacking. How likely is it that Donald Trump will be president this time next year, Pat?
I would say 90%, 90 to 100%.
Eleanor?
Next year.
90 to 100%.
This time next year.
No, I'm not going to put it that. I'm not going to put it that high. But people who think he's going to be gone quickly.
What's your number?
My number, 60%.
Pat, sorry, Clarence.
Well, no, I think it's 90%. We don't know what surprise may come down the road, but we don't have an impeachable offense now. We just got suspicion.
75%.
Okay. Issue 2, fire and fury.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
In territory, population, and economy, North Korea is tiny compared to the United States. Yet North Korea's increasingly advanced ballistic missile program is causing great concern in Washington. In 2 July missile tests, North Korea suggested it could strike the United States. And note this, the Washington Post reports that US intelligence officials believe North Korea can equip its missiles with nuclear warheads. Until now, most analysts had believed that North Korea was at least a year from attaining such a capability. In response, President Trump is pressuring China to restrain its ally, North Korea, from conducting further missile tests. Still, White House officials say, the president is ready to use military force if diplomacy fails.
Question, are we heading towards war on the Korean Peninsula, Pat?
Look, I think there's a real danger of a collision. Here I disagree with the president. I don't think you lay down red lines and say what we're going to do, fire and fury and all the rest of it. But I do think that we are at a point where the president has put down certain red lines. If North Korea crosses them and tests a missile, but more probably, if they test another nuclear weapon, I think there's a real possibility of a conflict between North Korea and the United States, which General Mattis is correct about, would be catastrophic with all the artillery pieces on the DMZ firing towards Seoul. I hope not. I hope they can work this out. But both Kim Jong-un and the President of the United States are really the top of the insults now. The next step is shooting.
And this is nuclear brinkmanship, and I can't think of two worse people to be conducting it than the North Korean leader, whose rationality is questioned, although he's rational enough to keep a nuclear program going to protect him from the fate that Iraq suffered or the fate that Libya suffered. And
so you think this is pushback for our foreign policy?
Yeah, and Trump is making all of these threats, and it's now, they're daring each other, and the danger of stumbling into a nuclear exchange is real. And I don't know that this president grasps that. He behaves like he's in the middle of a real estate deal in New York instead of dealing with nuclear weapons, for goodness sake.
You thought you were going to be joining up again?
Well, they both they both behave like WWE contestants, all the saber rattling and all the trash talking. And Eleanor's right. I'm more nervous about the way Trump's statements get translated to the Koreans and vice versa. Are we reading them correctly? I think General Mattis and our other military leaders are wonderfully informed, and I have a lot of faith in them.
Do they help you
to
sleep at night?
Help me sleep at night to keep a lid on our president.
Evan.
Yeah, well, look, I support the president's tougher approach with North Korea, or at least directionally. My question is, though, how did we get to this point in the rhetoric? And I think It appears to have been inspired by a Washington Post article containing information about a miniaturized nuclear weapon that North Korea now allegedly has. But that's information that the president would have already had. Right. Yet that's what sparked this war of words. And now the president has drawn a red line that he may now feel the need in protection of his ego to enforce.
Well, Fire and Fury is also apparently a video game from the company developed by Steve Bannon.
And I'm a good
so
millennial.
I think
was also afraid he's used some speeches too.
I think this corresponds, that kind of rhetoric, fire and fury, we're going to get in your face, we'll bomb the bleep out of you. It corresponds with, I believe, the persona and the character of Trump, the man he wants to be and the president he wants to be.
Let me ask
but
you
I
this.
agree, out there on those kinds of words out there, when Kim Jong-un, and I agree with him, I think he's very rational. He's evil, but I think he's very rational.
But Pat,
he may just challenge us.
You went to China with Nixon. How much of this do you think, does anyone think, is to do with trying to send a message to China? Listen, if you don't crack down,
no,
the worst is coming.
China is complicit because how does North Korea, with its meager budget, support this sophisticated missile program?
Right.
The money is coming from somewhere.
Right.
The other thing, Russia shares a border
But
with
how
China.
do we get the Chinese
I
to
would
do
love
more?
to see the administration
if you're going to get the Chinese
ramp
to
down
do more,
on the Russians
but
too.
this would involve the world economy. You could put a 25% tariff on Chinese goods coming into the United States. That would get their attention. And what we want from China is to cut off their 90% of the trade
Is
with
this
North
just
Korea.
your secret way to get protectionism?
But no, but I'll tell you, that would really dynamite the global economy. I mean, I would advise you to get your stocks out of your IRA.
Well, I've noticed Trump has been ramping down his rhetoric on China right now because he wants China's cooperation in dealing with North Korea, which is understandable.
China said if the balloon goes up, if North Korea strikes first, we'll be neutral, but if America strikes first, will come in on the side of North Korea.
Yeah,
this is the key. The key is that China is trying to protect the status quo on the peninsula. That has to change. In order for that to change, we have to make the status quo more costly to China. So, and I think if there is a strategy here, I think that's what it is. Right. I don't think, though, Trump's rhetoric falls in line nicely, or it helps that strategy.
No, well, the theory is that the tough rhetoric is really directed at China to let them know that he's serious. The Chinese president was at Mar-a-Lago when they shot off the missiles.
Let's have a fun little exit question here.
No more chocolate cake at Mar-a-Lago for the Chinese.
Let's have a nice little exit question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the likelihood that North Korean state TV will threaten the US within the week, and 1 being the likelihood that Pat will run with Chelsea Manning on the presidential ticket in 2020. How likely is Trump to bomb North Korea? 1 to 10.
He will not bomb North Korea unless North Korea provokes him with a serious military action of some kind.
Well, the military action that they're threatening is 4 missiles into the waters around Guam. Now,
that's enough.
That's aggressive, but not enough to start a nuclear war over.
Well, I think both Trump and Kim Jong-un have something in common. They both care about their survival, both politically and physically. I don't think they either wants to start a war. I'm more worried about an accidental trigger.
I'm worried about an accidental trigger as well, but I'm also worried about 2 egomaniacs who have drawn red lines that are hard to back off from. So I put the likelihood at 4. I think it's relatively low, but not so far away from 50-50.
I'm a 5. When we come back, White House wars.
Okay.
Issue 3, White House wars.
So I want to congratulate you on having done a fantastic job, General, and we look forward to, if it's possible, an even better job as Chief of Staff. That's right, sir.
If the world is now Trump's stage, his White House staffers are central players. Yet these days, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue seems like a pageant lifted from Shakespeare's dreams. Behind its grandeur, the White House hides a civil war of 3 factions. First up are the centrists. Led by Mr. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his wife, first daughter Ivanka, the centrists bind Trump to the Washington establishment. On the other side are the revolutionaries led by Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller. These Washington usurpers seek a new order of anti-globalist populism. Finally, there are the generals, led by White House Chief of Staff John Kelly and National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster. These old hands preference discipline and caution before populism or creativity.
Well, thank you very
and
much.
jockeying for the president's support.
Great honor
Each
to be
faction
here.
leaks rumor and
This
plots
magnificent
conspiracies
house
towards the
known
other's
as
downfall.
White House.
Question, is Trump's White House broken, Eleanor?
Palace intrigue is always a feature of White Houses, but I've never seen anything on this scale. Just a few weeks ago, we had the Mooch versus Reince Priebus, the chief of staff. They're both gone. We now have General Kelly trying to impose some order, and we have an attack campaign via social media against H.R. McMaster, the National Security Advisor, waged by your hero, Steve Bannon, Steve Miller, on a scale of something I've never seen. And McMaster is trying to get the national security policy shop, and he's gotten rid of some of Bannon's allies, and that sparked that feud. But Trump likes this to a certain degree. I mean, he talked about leaks recently and said there are those leaks where people are trying to prove how much they love me, and I'm flattered by that. And so a lot of the leaks are to gain his favor.
Eleanor's basically right about what's going on. The Republican establishment, Reince Priebus, has been sort of wiped out. You've got many of the nationalists, I think, in the NSC have been pretty much wiped out. The rising forces are the generals in Goldman Sachs, it seems, in the White House. But I think
just the people you were hoping for, right?
But no. But the truth is, Trump, meaning the general he brought in as chief of staff, excellent man, but he doesn't understand, I think, politics, policy issues. And the president's got to have those people around him. In particular, I would mention Bannon, because he's got the indispensable issues that enabled Trump to basically take the nomination and win the election: economic nationalism, immigration, staying out of foreign wars. And if he loses that element of his, I think politically the president's in trouble.
General Kelly has made it clear that he's going to try to manage the White House outside of Trump's office, outside of the Oval Office. In other words, keep things functioning. But as a result, you get these flamboyant statements from Trump about North Korea, for example, that are at odds with the Secretary of State, who comes behind to try to smooth the ruffled feathers and all. It's a crazy way to manage. And you're right, Trump does like a certain degree of chaos and unpredictability.
I think there's an interesting point in there, isn't it? That the risk of this is not just in the dimensions of domestic policy, but how foreign allies and adversaries would respond.
Well, absolutely, and I don't think they're impressed by any means by what they've seen this week, by all the rhetoric against North Korea, the nature of it, the uncontrolled nature of it. But I'll tell you, General Kelly, I think, was a good move for the president in this role. But I think we're seeing him now in a honeymoon period. And this is the point where other staffers are looking at him, and General Kelly, looking at them, deciding what the power dynamic's going to be. That's not going to last, especially as everyone is pointing out. The president likes to manage in a way in which he inspires competition among his staffers. To a certain degree, I think that's a healthy thing. At the degree we found it in the White House, in this White House, I don't think it's healthy, especially not when it's driven by, again, this feeding of Trump's ego, which he has acknowledged.
Kelly's obviously a good man, but he deals in the hierarchical structure and staff, and top man gives the order, et cetera. But in a White House, you've got to have people of different points of view and representing different constituencies have got to get their arguments before the president. Obviously, there's too much infighting.
You're a communications director in the White House.
Yeah.
What does he need to do that?
Well, the communications director in the White House. We
lasted 2 days.
As I said, look, communications director for Ronald Reagan is like being a jockey on Secretariat. You're going to be in the winner's circle. I don't care as long as you don't fall off the horse.
Right.
But that's an almost impossible task to get control of the communications, not only of the staff on a single page, but the President of the United States.
Right.
You could be putting together a program and somebody will come in and say, he just tweeted this.
Right.
And he went right out the window.
He's not going to give up that Twitter account.
No,
he loves it. He says it's like being the editor of the New York Times without having to pay any of the bills. And he has millions and millions, millions and millions of followers.
These are some of the fundamental issues that mean Kelly, I don't think, is going to be able to turn this White House into what we would consider a normally functioning operation.
But they have gotten more of the trappings of a professional White House. They brought
for
in
a week or two.
Exit question.
Ty Cobb as a
Does
lawyer.
John Kelly survive the next 6 months as Chief of Staff? Yes or no, Pat?
I think that's not a 90 or 100% one.
Yes or no?
That's a little. That's closer to 75%.
Okay, all right, and I'll give it 60, the same as I gave
Clarence?
war with North Korea.
Yeah.
I'll give it 75 and then cross my fingers for stability here.
I give it 75% for 6 months, but not much beyond that.
I don't think he gets fired. I think he might resign. Anyway,
Yeah.
Issue 4. Speaking of tech.
What we're really focused on is how do we push the creative boundaries and doing shows that bring people together, are exciting, sometimes they polarize people.
Netflix CEO Reed Hastings says he embraces controversial viewpoints. Perhaps, perhaps not. After all, according to the New York Times, Hastings used an August 2016 email to criticize a fellow Facebook board member, Peter Thiel, for supporting Donald Trump. Mr. Hastings apparently told Thiel, quote, "I'm so mystified by your endorsement of Trump for our president that for me, it moves from different judgment to bad judgment. Some diversity in views is healthy, but catastrophically bad judgment, in my view, is not what anyone wants in a fellow board member," end quote. And note another saga from Silicon Valley. Technology giant Google recently fired a staffer after he posted an internal memo criticizing the company's focus on gender diversity.
Question, do tech firms have a problem with free speech? Clarence?
Well, a lot of firms have a problem with free speech. There's no First Amendment to protect your free speech right in a private company. The rule is still please your boss and don't take your boss off. But what I find really frustrating is at Google, for example, where they said, let's have a free-flowing discussion. Let's have your opinion, what questions you have. Let's have dialogue. And then when somebody expresses an opinion that a lot of other folks don't like, suddenly they get fired.
Right.
I thought that was excessive. I mean, let's have let's talk about it. He raised some legitimate issues, and I don't agree with this paper.
Right.
I think he overgeneralized, but these are important issues people have in their heads, and let's not suppress that. Let's have open dialogue.
You know, diversity used to be something people praised about America. Now it is something that is mandated. Now it is something that if you criticize in any way, the hammer comes down on you. There's really a new intolerance in America.
I don't know that there's more intolerance, but I think the election of Donald Trump sort of took the lid off. I mean, he basically came out there, I'm going to tell you exactly what's on my mind, and he criticized just about every group in America, and somehow that made it okay. But this is a set piece in the culture wars, what's happened at Google. There's a bigger issue here, and it is, frankly, it is the alt-right going after media in an even bigger way than they already have.
Let's let Evan in here for
Well, I would agree that the bigger issue is exactly that, what we see happening between the alt-right movement, the white supremacist, the white nationalist movement, and the tech industry. Recently we had, for example, Airbnb withdraw some reservations of some white supremacist, white nationalists looking to attend.
Excuse me, the alt-right and the nationalists. Look, Donald Trump won the election closely, but he gave voice to a middle America that has not had a voice in a long time and has been neglected. Its interests ignored. Well, that's who he's speaking for. He's not speaking.
We're not talking even about Trump.
You're talking about the alt-right.
Well, I never brought up Trump, though. You brought up Trump. I mean, we can talk. I'm happy to talk about Trump. I do that all day, though. It's nice to talk about something else. Look, I'll say this. I read the memo. I thought he overgeneralized too. I wouldn't have written that. I don't agree with much of what he said. But I'll tell you this, it did seem like something that could be said in an open discussion. And I'll say this, if there ever were an opportunity for Google or another company to reinforce its ethos, that was it. And we can't be afraid of these opportunities.
And I think one of the positive things here
I think a little sunlight on this whole issue, because I do think women feel that a lot of the tech world is like a frat boy, a fraternity that they're not allowed into. And so, that needs to be aired. And I think firing this guy was way over the top. I mean Google just walked right into a lot of criticism that they didn't need.
And besides that, it stopped the conversation when there is a counter argument to his paper, but we're not going to hear it because there's not going to be that dialogue.
It is interesting, though, and I think it's particularly from the left. I mean, you see it as represented on this panel, more of a pushback towards some of the restrictionist college campuses is another area, but on creativity.
Conservatives, look, it's conservatives are being shouted down on college campuses. Let's face it.
Right. When was the last time you had an invite to a liberal college?
I got stuff thrown on me at one of those campuses, you know.
Pat,
but, you know, I mean,
I had my speech interrupted by a black
now.
student union on a campus too. I mean, you know, it's not just conservatives. Right. The fact is that our young people, bless their hearts, need to learn something about the value of real dialogue.
That's right.
And you don't just shut up your opposition. You engage them.
That's
and you
right.
come up with a better argument.
The trouble is both sides now have enormous amounts of certitude that they hold on to the absolute truth. And error and falsehood are
and
not to be
tolerated. And
tolerated.
that's why this is such a beautiful, important panel, right?
Too much purity is expected on either side, and if you violate the purity, you get shouted down. And social media makes it easy for everybody to do the shouting.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues we have with Google is that creativity issue, isn't it? That if they suffer on free speech, what are they going to be able to innovate the next product? Anyway, we'll be right back with predictions. Predictions, Pat.
The investigation, special prosecutor has no indictments to date. That deficiency, I think, will be corrected by November 1, if not by Labor Day, and they'll start with the minnows.
Eleanor.
Hear, hear. Trump and his Attorney General will not be able to shut down the leaks because Anthony Scaramucci, in his short-lived time as White House Communications Director, had it right when he said there are people in this building, meaning the White House, who feel it's their job to save America from the Trump administration, and those people are throughout the government.
Clarence?
NOAA, the National Oceanographic Administration, has announced that last year was the hottest year on record globally, hotter than the previous year, which was the hottest year globally. I predict this year will be even hotter.
Do you think Republicans are going to start shifting in support of more carbon taxation or something?
Let's not ask for the impossible.
Evan?
Well, I think the Russia investigation will continue to intensify, or we'll see signs of its intensification. And as it does that, Donald Trump will continue to ramp up his verbal wars against other party leaders and foreign leaders alike.
I predict that the United States Navy and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps will have a conflict of limited nature in the Persian Gulf in the coming weeks. John, we hope you enjoyed the show. Bye-bye.